So there's a persistent stereotype in tech. Product marketers make things look pretty, but they take a backseat when it comes to building the pipeline. But the real business impact, that's often handed to demand gen. But what if we flip that? What if product marketing wasn't just a support function, but the driving force behind how go-to-market systems scale, how outbound motion gets built, and how revenue truly starts? Today's guest, Nikhil, the Senior Director of Marketing at Chargebee, has operated at that intersection. He's helped take GTM engines from the ground up and built a pipeline in millions by applying core PMM principles, not leaving them behind. Nikhil, welcome to Behind the Brief. I'm so glad you're here.
Glad to be here, Shruti. I've been here as a product marketer for close to a decade now. And I think it's safe to say here in this podcast that back in the day when we all started being product marketeers, most companies did not know what to do with us. They knew that product marketing had to exist because they had seen this template play out well in successful product companies. But we've done a bunch of tasks ranging from case study writing to social media to being pre-sales for some deals, helping them close some deals, to being support, and then obviously doing some product marketing work as well. So it's been fun to go through this journey, and to see now companies deploying product marketeers strategically is great and warms my heart. So happy to be here and talk to you about what's been my ride through these last 10 years.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so excited to actually dive deeper into the questions that I have set up for today. So let's start from here, Nikhil. You have worked with various verticals across SaaS, customer support, and experience, supply chain, billing, and monetization. A lot. So what's the marketing moment, the kind that has forced you to rethink about what, good marketing actually takes?
I'm going to focus on your words around what good marketing takes, right? Often I found that the nice campaigns that we all love to celebrate, share on social media or on Slack channels at office stem from what we typically call grunt work. This could be digging into customer calls for insights, could be analyzing competitor websites, could be digging into product usage information to find the sort of patterns and insights that lead to the successful campaigns that we see published and celebrated out elsewhere. And in that sense, I feel marketing has always been a unique function where, unlike other orgs in the company where research to execution is equally recognized and rewarded, marketeers often get recognized and rewarded for that portion of the work that's actually published and that's out there, and rarely acknowledged for all the work that happens under the hood, right? So I found that very interesting about marketing. And I feel like good marketing work isn't always about something shiny, something that's glamorous, but it's often spreadsheets and Google Docs.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, you have also worked at early stage startups, and it is a lot of work under pressure. And I've also worked at startups, and how it is usually very crazy, very messy. Startups often mean building planes mid-flight, like you are just building on the go. So you took Chargebee's outbound engine from zero to a pipeline of tens of millions, and that's crazy, right? Can you walk us through one moment where limited time or budget actually forced you to get scrappy, or maybe it paid off in a big way?
So often marketeers have limited budget and limited folks. One thing that I've learned from experience is not ask leaders for more people and more budget or more tools until I've derived the clarity to solve at least the first iteration of the problem. And I'll probably give you an example of an episode as to why I have come to this particular learning. For example, we were trying to set up the outbound motion. You just highlighted that. One of the key aspects of a successful outbound motion is to have a database of ICP fit accounts. Now, typically, we would look to tools like Zoom Info or a Captain Data to download a list of accounts that the sales teams can then do an outreach for. However, companies in general have nuances around ICP fitment, which means just purely having a company's details on a spreadsheet would not amount to us being able to win the deal, right? And it's a very costly mistake to have if we slip here. Why? Because it typically takes 3 months for a person to warm up an account, which means like you would have constant outreach on LinkedIn, sometimes on phone, on emails, to get a response from one of the stakeholders who can potentially move the needle for your deal. And once you get that response, the last thing you want to hear is, we probably are not an ICP fit for this particular company, right? And it kills all the effort that you made, the morale of all the folks involved from marketing to sales, in unlocking a conversation. Now, obviously, this meant we had to build a list of ICP fit accounts. Now, the algorithm to do this coincidentally was built by me in 2021, where it needed a human being to actually go to websites of target accounts, or to determine if they were target accounts even then, and see if they were fit for our product. Now, it wasn't humanly possible to do more than 200 accounts in a day. It was very manual, painful, and because of these reasons, it would also lead to a lot of errors in what the team would recognize as ICP fit account, but what the salespeople would consider as ICP. Which meant in a day, we were stuck in a situation where neither the team that was doing the manual work was happy, nor was the downstream teams that were receiving these accounts from the market research team. Now, all of this had led to a situation in 2023 July where we were wondering, we need to hire maybe more people. We need to probably hire more tools or better databases. And this is why I told you I've stopped immediately pushing for new tools or new hires or whenever there is a problem that we cannot solve. We were in July 2023 and we were wondering, surely there must be a better way to do this than hire 10 more people. And then it struck us that in 2022 December, an innocent product launch happened called ChatGPT, right, by OpenAI. And by July 2023, we had Claude from Anthropic as well. So we were like, surely there must be a way where one of these companies, one of these applications should be able to help us mimic a human being, scan a bunch of accounts and their websites, and tell us if they were ICP fit based on some conditions that we had, right? And so as a first attempt, we tried with 100 websites on top of Claude's early version, and it gave us two very clear outputs, right? It gave us clearly fit accounts and clearly not fit accounts. This meant we could actually scale this across to thousands of websites and take out a large chunk of fit and not fit accounts directly from the pot, which meant a job that required 10 people to do now is being done by 3 people today at Chargebee with better accuracy. So downstream teams used to report 70% error rates in what teams fit were not ICP fit accounts that were passed down. Today, that percentage is less than 5%. Right? So we've not only reduced the number of folks needed to do a problem, solve a problem, but also improve the accuracy of the work that happened. All of this happened because when we were vulnerable, we didn't give in to let's hire more people, throw bodies at a problem. Sometimes I think what helps us is being actually scrappy is actually a good weapon to revisit our assumptions, because we keep assuming some things cannot be done because the last time we tried it, it wasn't possible. But the pace at which technology is changing today, I think we have to revisit our assumptions every 3 months to see if what we thought was manual couldn't be done before. Are those assumptions still true?
Right. Yeah, I think it actually makes you more resourceful when you really have to be scrappy. And I love that example. And I have a follow-up question, because you have been in product marketing for so long. So how did your PMM background influence your problem solving during this big of a situation?
Funny thing is, I think me being a product marketer made me a better demand gen person, and having worked as a demand gen person in terms of solving outbound or solving webinars made me a better PMM, right? It's one of those things that nobody talks enough about. Like in 2025, we've all made marketing into hyper specialized sub functions. Everyone is in their little swim lanes. There's not enough collaboration between these different functions, right? But the underlying fundamentals on what makes you a good marketeer is the same regardless of whether you're in events, whether you're in product marketing, right? So when I shifted from PMM and tried to do outbound, right, one of the first things I had to do, because I knew the product well, I knew the ICP fitment well, was to be more stringent on which accounts should we target, right? Now, if I were a PMM only and I didn't have a demand gen target and a budget against my name, this would have been a theoretical advice. But now that I had to hit a number, and it was on me, the target was on me, I basically was putting money where my mouth was, right? Because now I'm saying I trust my ICP criteria to the extent that I'm okay to reduce our focus and focus on a certain narrow set of band of accounts. And I'm predicting that we'll still hit our numbers instead of a wide range of marketing targets, right? So that made me understand the significance of having your ICP sorted. That made me understand how important and critical it is for you to have the pressure of numbers to then refine what makes it a good ICP. Same for messaging, right? If I had to test messaging, it was no longer a theoretical framework that I was suggesting. That messaging had to deliver leads and pipeline for me, right? And so that autonomy changed everything. I felt I became a sharper PMM because I did demand gen, and I was a better demand gen person because I had the PMM foundation, right? It's one of those dual combinations that make you into a very sharp and a dangerous marketeer, right? In a good way.
Of course. I think, yeah, that kind of combination definitely not many people talk about these days. It has always been like storytelling, yes, messaging, yes, positioning, yes. But when it comes to building that pipeline or thinking it from a demand gen person perspective, I think there's still a lot of scope for product marketers to gain that as a skill, or, maybe try to be in their shoes and think more strategically like that and change the narrative of how product marketers bring value to the table. So moving on to when things broke, we are definitely talking about things breaking and falling apart. But you have been running cross-functional teams, outbound GTM programs, and it means breaking processes, alignment, and morale in the overall team. So when you hit a wall during this kind of scale up, what's the first thing you have tackled? Like, what did you decide wasn't worth fixing and what was?
When a company shifts from inbound to outbound, I think a fundamental thing to fix is trust. Because in an outbound scenario, right? We as the company, we are building a target list. We then make a list of stakeholders in the target account where we would like to do an outreach and try to unlock a conversation. In the inbound scenario, what happens is someone from the company does the hard work of doing research about your category, does the hard work of actually coming to your website and either signing up or filling out a form to talk to sales, which means the intent is there. There is clearly an urgency. The conversation is straightforward. So the deal cycles are shorter when compared to outbound, which means sales and the underlying downstream teams are now having to switch to a new world where their compensations are probably going to be delayed because the deals are going to take longer to close, right? Now, we need to make sure in this scenario that every conversation and every account that's in the outbound target list is worth it. I told you, it takes sometimes 3 months to unlock a conversation. And the last thing you want to know after unlocking a conversation is that this is not an ICP fit account, right? That leads to distrust. And when that happens, the first thing that folks do is to stop trusting marketing sourced accounts, right? They're going to start leaning on events. They're going to start leaning on their own personal connects to unlock enterprise deals, but they're going to stop using marketing sourced accounts. And a lot of companies, when they transition from inbound to an outbound friendly or an outbound first organization, this is where it breaks. It breaks when folks no longer trust the marketing source accounts. And if you need it to not break, for the first 6 to 9 months, every single account that is there at play on the outbound GTM table has to be an account that's doubly checked in terms of ICP fitment, that product can definitely service, that we can definitely close. Because once this period is over, right, by this time, your sales teams would have started closing some of these outbound accounts. Over the period of 9 to 12 months, your sales teams would have started closing a lot of these outbound accounts, which means they would have noticed that the deal sizes are larger than inbound, right? Because they have greater degree of control over pricing. They're probably able to position our products better. They're also able to position the company better, the services better, especially as they are trying to unlock enterprises, right? So this phase of 6 to 9 months where the switch is happening is where everything can make or break. Fair enough. So that's what I would focus on, which is building trust, ensuring that downstream teams can continue to trust marketing the same way they would trust us in an inbound lead. No, and you're answering your second question, right, which is around what is the one thing that you'd probably not bother with. I think sometimes we could overdo it by going deeper into the nuances of whether this company has specific asks, feature asks, which make it a difficult deal to close. Or like you observed the company from a website, or you've seen some of the speeches that their CXOs have given at various events, and you feel this is probably not the direction that they would like from a product perspective, right? But I would say as long as there's fundamental ICP fitment, specifics are something that we cannot always control. We can't always predict until there's a deep conversation. And sometimes logging these specifics into our pipeline, into the CRM, is the only way for you to make sure the product notices these specifics and these nuances. so that they get real feedback on what it takes to unlock these enterprise customers. Without that happening, you will not evolve as a business. So yeah, this is summarize. The one thing that we will not do or we should focus on is to build that trust or retain the trust that folks have on the inbound leads, and make sure the outbound leads and accounts have the same level of trust. And the one thing you shouldn't have to care too much about is worrying about nuances or specifics of use cases and capabilities that one particular company would need as opposed to the overall category itself.
Yeah, I think that sort of clarity is something that you derive when you have actually been in those, breaking situations and you have to take a call and see what's the calculated risk that you can take. I think that's something that you definitely have been doing for a long while, and you have successfully, led such wonderful teams. And that's what we always need that, and we cannot jinx it. People talk about success stories, but I really want to focus on your biggest launch fail so far. So you have led plenty of successful plays, but can we talk about something that really flopped? What was the idea? What broke down? And how did the team regroup?
It's very tough to talk about things that did not work well, and I hope it doesn't get circulated too widely. One of the things when you're launching something new is, as a product marketer, you have a sort of a theoretical, idea on what messaging would work. And when I say theoretical, I mean more from a secondary research perspective, because you have built something fresh. You're going to start attracting EAP customers, which means you haven't yet had a chance to refine your messaging and talk to folks. And so what you're going by is what works or what you've seen your competitors play at. And typically what the SEO team tells you will drive you more clicks, right? So in this case, the SEO team told me to have a product category called call center software, right? This was an EAP launch in 2017. I went with it because call center software is a great keyword with a lot of search results and was amazing, right? And we launched this EAP page, got a lot of clicks. And when folks signed up, I would personally get on a call, set up their, account, because they had to test this, right? It's a phone product. So they had to test this with a phone call. So I would either add some of their own team members or add myself so that they could call me and talk to me and stuff like that, right? And potentially this software also had a recording feature. Now, when I asked them to leave recordings to me, right, that we can then replay together, often they forget that the recording was on, pretty much like this podcast conversation that we are having, right? And we ended up they end up talking about things about the software itself. So they would end up saying things like, hey, I know the page said call center software, and I hate call centers, but this software doesn't seem like a call center software at all. And then someone else would say, it's not as complicated as what the page looked like. And when I had 5-6 instances of this, I felt really bad because I was like, hey, what is it that we are doing wrong? Why do people not like the keyword, right? That's been recommended that everyone wants me to use, right? And so I ended up going back, having a conversation with the SEO team saying, I understand this is the sacrifice in terms of search volumes and results and everything. But if customer after customer, right, in the EAP phase, reviews a product and says, this product is more delightful to use than what the keyword makes me feel like, I feel there's a fundamental difference in messaging. I feel there's a fundamental change that we have to make. Let's remove the traffic considerations, keep that aside. We can probably do something out, figure out something out for the SEO purposes. But the product itself cannot be called a call center software, right? And so we pivoted to trying to call it a phone system, which then worked because people understood what a phone system meant. And when they tried out the phone system EAP, they did not feel like the messaging was different from how the software itself behaved. So we wanted to achieve this feeling where the product, the home page and the product feature pages almost act like an extension to the product itself and not create any sort of dissonance between they sold me a call center software, but this is actually simple to use and it doesn't behave like it, and I have negative connotations about the call center image. There are people who said that my imagery of a call center is 30 people, 40 people in a crowded room, all talking to each other. People can hear other conversations, but that's not this software. And I was like, yes, that's not this software. Right. So it takes time. This whole thing took 3 months for me to sit and analyze, reconfigure where we stood, have conversations with the SEO team, take a hit on the obvious SEO karma that we were going to get. But in return, we had a messaging that worked. We used some of those early conversations into deriving the 3 pillars of the product. So I think if I remember it right, we call it beautifully simple, modern and intuitive, can set up in 2 minutes, right? Because these were all the things that they kept repeating over and over in the EAP phase. So it's one example of a failure that eventually made it successful. It's like those inside out core memories where sadness resulted in joy later on. So yeah.
Right. I think it's mostly 99% of these conversations of failure that I've always heard how people, like you have navigated into a huge success and make it work for you, right? If you're not making mistakes, that's also one of the marketing lessons 101. You will not know what's working for you, your team and your product. So thank you for sharing that. I'm sure sharing failure stories are more difficult than talking about success. In our previous talks, we have mentioned experiencing imposter syndrome when doing pipeline planning for the first time or, taking such bold decisions. So, how did you manage that and what advice would you give to other product marketers?
Sometimes learning a new skill, especially when a company is fully running, right, and at scale, is kind of terrifying. For example, when Chargebee was shifting from fully inbound to an outbound engine, and I had to pick that up, right? It would have been easier if this was 12 years back when Chargebee was just a new startup, right? Now, this is a fully functional, high-performing company, and when we have to set up a new motion, we have to set it up at scale. And it's always terrifying because you're second guessing yourself. You hope you're doing the right things, but you don't know if it's right or wrong because there's no one in the company who's done this playbook before, right? You're trying to figure it out for the first time and make it work in your company. What people don't realize also when you pick up something like this in your company and you have an imposter syndrome is you have to relax because there's a reason why people are giving this to you in the first place, right? Clearly, they trust you to do this work. Secondly, I don't think people in the company already have a playbook, which is why they want you to figure it out, which means you probably will have a better experience when you get down into the engine room more than others, right? And one of the things that's helped me out is the realization that most marketing skills are transferable. Even if you are an events person, you're a product person, you're a content writer, and you're picking up something else in marketing, most of the core competencies are same. As long as you know your product, as long as you understand your market, as long as you know the value you deliver to your customers, everything else, the output might change, the format of the output might change, the stakeholders you interact with might change, but everything else is transferable. The other thing, when you are faced with an imposter syndrome situation or you're picking up something new and you're scared, go reach out to folks on LinkedIn, in your networks who've done this before in the past. That's what I did, right? I reached out to folks who've done outbound previously, who have had the experience of doing this for years and years together, generated multiple millions of pipeline and outbound, to learn what do they do well, to validate some of my ideas, and most importantly, to know what didn't work out for them, right? And I think the most important thing when you do something this new, and you pick up something new that's previously not worked at your company, is to share everything. Good news, bad news, neutral news. Early on, I used to only share progress made, right? Good progress made, reporting only the wins. I think when we do that, while it makes us feel and look good, it also gives you a chance to reshape the discussions around this new function that you're setting up, right? Because your company already knows you're starting this from scratch. You're picking this up. This is the only time where you can actually bring out all the issues that you face, all the processes that have to change, all the tools that you would need to tweak to set this up. If your CRM is in a mess, do that. If your pipeline numbers are down, share that. It's fine. If you need new capabilities from your product org to support your new launch in a new market, share that openly, right? The more we openly share all types of news, we get more help, we can adjust course and build trust while things shape up, right? So please share all news. Don't worry about it. Seek help from whoever has done this before. Sometimes they might be in your company. Sometimes they might be folks outside the company. Don't worry about that. All marketing skills are transferable. As long as you know your product, you know the market, you know the value you deliver, you should be fine no matter what you pick up.
I think as long as you're curious to solve that problem, you are good to be in that situation. Thank you so much for sharing that. So moving on to one of the questions that is closest to everybody's personal professional life, and looking back, what's one unpolished lesson from your career, something you had to learn the hard way but now swear by in marketing strategy or leadership?
It's a very deep question. One of the things I've realized is that if we were always going to deliver what is possible by our bandwidth, the extent of our arm, right? We would only be able to pick up few things. If we really have to move up the ladder, it's about getting 10 things done when you can humanly do only three. But obviously, you can't do 10 things when you can only do three. So if you have to do that, you do it by getting people around you, right? Getting them aligned in the same direction. There should be the same purpose that they're all driving towards. And that's what build momentum. That momentum helps you achieve those 10 projects when you could have only done three. Now, you can't do all of this without a support system, right? And you need a bunch of people that you can trust to get the job done with very little micromanagement, because that's what will take you away from achieving more than what you should be able to achieve, right? So this one thing that I heard from Guy Kawasaki in a virtual event where he said A players hire A players and very happy with each other, and it's always a lean team, but all of them are power hitters. But if you're an insecure B player, you will hire C so that you can control that person, and a C hires a D, and a D hires an E, and so on and so forth, right? If you go the later route, you're going to suddenly see all the A players from your team vanish. They resign for whatever reason, and you end up at the top of the hierarchy, but the whole hierarchy and the whole set of folks that you've hired depend on you for doing everything. Which means, when I said in the beginning, right, if you want to do 10 things, but you can humanly do three, you need a better support system. In this case, you are going to have to do all the 10 things yourself, because every step of the way, this B, C, D, E players are going to depend on your counsel and your approval to take a single step. So the day you build a team that can replace you is the day you can truly take something off your plate. The day you can truly take something off your plate, you're liberated, because you're now free to get rid of those problems and pick up something entirely new, right? When you pick up something entirely new, you can start thinking beyond the operational grind, right? Get out of the engine room and get into strategy, trying to figure out what next for the company, what next for your career, right? If you do all of this, that's how you move up the ladder. That's how you scale yourself.
Right. I love the line that you mentioned that you need to hire people who can replace you. I love the fact that you as a leader feel that you would want to hire people who can one day replace you, which means you are hiring partners for your team. You are hiring people who can think like yourself, and in most cases, but who can also ask you questions, who can also say no to you. So I think that's something I really love that you have mentioned.
There are a couple of folks in my team today who I'm scared of. 3 more years, and I think I'll be irrelevant.
And I think that's something to brag about. I think you've built an amazing team.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. So moving on to a couple of last questions I have for you. So you've worked closely with sales leaders and business development teams as well and trained them on key messaging. So what has been the most important talking point you have emphasized, and how did this collaboration continue to be of success for your demand gen efforts?
Okay. So I've heard this question a couple of times, sometimes in interviews, sometimes in casual conversations between marketeers. The one thing that I want to clarify upfront is marketing is sales done at scale, right? We've got our frameworks, we have our messaging pillars, we have our assumptions on what should the pitch be, what should ideally work. But sales actually, day in and day out, talks to folks, tries to sell our product and services, is out there handling objections, is figuring out what lands and what falls flat, right? So when it comes to sales enablement, what we are actually doing is finding those two outliers in sales, right? Who always hit their quota, who land these top tier deals that your CEOs and CXOs are proud of. See if they are open to collaborating with marketing. Deconstruct their deals. Why did they win? Why did they win when they were faced with such tough competition? Why did they phrase things a certain way? When did the prospect lean in and start resonating with the pitch that your sales teams are doing? How did they overcome objections? What kind of objections did they overcome? Right? That becomes marketing's starting point. This is in theory, this pulled straight from the trenches, right? Which means we are ensuring that what's working for the top tier reps is made available. All that intelligence is made available to everyone in the revenue org, right? And then what happens then is that we lift the entire team's win rates. That's the real play. It's not about creating a perfect pitch deck, a perfect PDF, a perfect training in vacuum, right? It's about studying the outliers, finding the patterns, and then applying those lessons across to everyone in the sales org.
Right. I think that's the kind of collaboration we should be having with the sales team and people who are the real customer facing teams. I think that's the perfect example of how you can scale your teams to success.
I'm actually doing that today, right? Like, so we are trying to understand how to unlock certain new verticals. My companion is a senior director of sales. I sit with this person and try to understand what works, listen to some of their calls, go with this person and talk to some customers, some folks who are not necessarily customers, who are not necessarily prospects, but are in the same industry. And then they tell us, hey, this is how we pitch. Would this be right? And those folks are very happy to share. And they say, hey, if you are trying to unlock a vertical like this, here are the 3 things that we actually care about. Why don't you make sure that that's part of your pitch? And none of this would happen if marketing and sales didn't work hand in hand. So, yeah.
Yeah, of course. I think the real work, the impact is where you actually build those relationships and work together as a team. Yeah. So thank you so much, Nikhil, for bringing all those important and difficult conversations today. I would love to ask you a couple of quick fire questions. And what's one marketing hill you will die on?
Everyone in a software company is a product marketeer because ultimately everyone's purpose should be to sell that product, right? I often hear folks saying, I'm not in product org, or I'm not a product marketer, so I don't have to necessarily learn, the product itself. And I think that's an excuse that we shouldn't have.
Right. What's worst advice you have ever received?
There are a couple of advices that come to my mind, but the one thing that I definitely had to let go of, especially being in a cross-functional function like product marketing, is people advising me to say yes to everything if you need a quick promotion. Sometimes all it takes is for us to analyze what's being asked, why is it important, explain what we have to drop that we're already doing in order to handle this new ask, and then lay out a timeline that explains what this impact means, what changes you are making, and why this might necessarily be something that someone else can pick up, right? If all this clarity is written down in a document, you don't have to say yes and you don't have to say no to everything, right? It then becomes a balance between what's important and what should be done, and is there no one else in the company who can do this? Because there are some things that only you can do, and there are some things that someone else can also pick up. When it's written down in this format, it's easy to then for the leaders to understand who can potentially step in if not you, right? So learning that real success comes from delivering value, whether it's to the company, whether it's to the customers, is the way you will go up, not being a yes person.
The last one. And what's your fix-it ritual when maybe your campaign breaks?
Campaigns do break from time to time. Sometimes you're roped in to fix something that's broken. I think one of the things that has usually worked for me is to talk to the operators directly. Usually these discussions happen in a team meeting with 20 different folks with varying degrees of context, trying to understand why something succeeded or failed. I found success in skipping these public meetings and setting up directly a meeting with the 1 or 2 people who are actually responsible, who feel accountable for that particular program, and trying to understand why something worked or didn't work. So directly talk to the operators. They usually have very clear understanding of why things work or did not work. Don't hold public discourses.
That just wraps up our quick fire round as well. And thank you so much, Nikhil, for being so candid. And I'm sure people listening to us will be taking away a lot of great insights and actionable chunks from our conversation. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks, Shruti. Thanks for having me here.